5 a very busy, almost, year later. Spira Bridge Year 3, Day 5, 0800. It had been a very busy couple of months. They had crossed the remainder of the galaxy they had been and had crossed the void to the far galaxy. During the trip, Spira had continued looking for traces of the Zavaris, but there had been nothing for her to find. The AI had also accessed the DSI network and had begun exchanging information with Destiny. This had allowed them to get a glimpse at the ship's current status. It was still obsessed with catching up, but it was making good time. At the same time, Spira had also begun replenishing its supplies for building communications relays, which had given them more to study. And finally, there had been a ton of promotions. The original plan had been for the Nova Roma expedition to reach Destiny, with the two crews merging into one. But because of what had happened with Destiny, that plan was out the window. So Landry and O'Neill had decided to start handing out what they considered long overdue promotions. To begin with, Ann Teldy had been promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and Epsilon Site XO. As for Colonel Telford, he hadn't really been promoted. But the Epsilon site was now fully operational, which meant that he had 5 SG teams and a full support staff under his command. So in practice, he was the General Landy of Freedom Prime. The local Senate was still discussing the program's budget and was considering increasing the amount of SG teams to 8 or 10. Alas, that decision would probably still be stuck in committee for the considerable future. The final promotion at the Epsilon site was Captain Laura Cadman, who would take Teldy's old job as Chief of Security aboard Spira. Her previous job had been XO under Telford, so at first glance it sounded like a demotion. Especially because would end up fourth in command on the ship. But the job would come with a promotion to the rank of Major. And the Chief of Security also doubled as the commanding officer for NR3. As for Spira's third in command, that job was held by Major Levine. He had not been promoted in rank, but his status as third was a step up. Levine outranked Cadman because he had more time in grade. Another promotion had been Xander Henderson, who had been promoted to sergeant. And to conclude the list, there were Haley and Vale. Vale was now a full-bird colonel, while Haley had been promoted to lieutenant colonel. This was noticeable when Vale walked onto the bridge. "Colonel," he said with a smile. "Colonel," Haley said. "So, how long until we reach Freedom Prime?" "About a minute," Haley said. "So, what's the plan when we get there?" "To begin with, we have a whole lot of crew members to pick up." Besides picking up Cadman, they would also pick up 15 of the new Asurans who had left the ship to fly the Nakai colony domes to the planet, and they would pick up 60 brand new crew members. Tilda all part of the deal to get Chaser and the Epsilon site. Tilda, also, I want to empty artifact storage, which would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only would it get them space, the Epsilon site had bigger and more advanced labs. They would be able to do a whole bunch of tests and research that Spira simply wasn't equipped for. And our new Asuran friends haven't been twiddling their thumbs while waiting for us to catch up. They have some upgrades they want to install before we move on. Nice. It was at this point that Spira dropped out FTL. As they approached Freedom Prime, they found that they were not alone in the planet's orbital space. Exodus 1, the new ship that Alex Patterson commanded, and Exodus 2 were in orbit. There was also a shipyard that was building 3 more Exodus-class ships. There was also another Nakai carrier class under construction. This ship, Exodus 7, had not been part of the original plan. But the new Asurans had provided the Primians with the right tools to build a duplicate of Exodus 2. So now, Freedom Prime would be protected by 6 Exodus-class and 2 carrier-class ships, and that was not all. Because there were also 8 defensive satellites in orbit, and all 17 cities on the surface now had major ground-to-orbit weapons. It was not enough to take the fight to the Goa'uld. But if the Goa'uld attempted to attack Freedom Prime, the Primians would kick their asses. And there were similar defenses for their one off-world colony on the drawing board. "Let's have a look at the surface," Haley said. "Yes, ma'am," Grogan said from the weapons console. Haley and Vale made their way to his console and looked at an imagine of the surface on one of the displays. There had been 82 Nakai colony domes, and there were 17 cities. And 82 divided by 17 was 4.82. The Senate had decided to round it down to 4 domes for each city. Those domes had been dismantled, with the parts being used to overhaul those cities. This division had left them with 14 domes unassigned. 7 had been used to build the shipyards, while the other 7 were part of the plans for the off-world colony. "They've been really busy," Haley said. "Colonel Telford has no intention of letting anybody unfriendly near this planet ever again," Vale said. Haley nodded. She wondered what the crew of Chaser would say if they saw how far this planet had come in the last couple months. Tilda, of course, it's not like they have been sitting still during all of this. Tilda, but for now, they had their own ship to worry about. Chaser Bridge Year 3, Day 5, 0820. Everett Young was reading the latest updates that would be sent over the DSI network today. While Spira had been heading towards Freedom Prime, Chaser had been pursuing Destiny. Ironically, it had been Pelop's former host Sam Wallace that had made their mission easier. While Ellie's father was not the genius his son was, he was a skilled computer programmer. He had given the advanced telemetry filters a major upgrade, which had led to them finding more resources than they had expected. But more importantly, he had been bonding with Ellie, and that had made Ellie the happiest he had been since losing Jin. Which brought up the next subject. They had found Jin, along with Dr. Perry, a new Asuran called Ben, and a Viceroy soldier on F7L-229. How they had survived on the harsh planet was quite a story. But right now, it was not the story that Young was reading. The Viceroy soldier had been called Dennis Young. And TJ had taken a look at his DNA, revealing that he was one of the Colonel's descendants. Having come face-to-face with Ancestor, he had agreed to tell them everything he knew about the Viceroy. Young was reading the latest information from his debrief. He had just turned the page when Ellie and Jin walked in. They were discussing the latest mission through the gate. Young smirked at their conversation. "Tilda with both Jin and his dad here, he is one happy camper. Tilda and he was not alone. Rush had been reunited with Amanda Perry. Not only was Perry alive, she now had a working body again. The last time the two of them had met inside Destiny's computer, there had been issues between them. In the weeks since she had come aboard, however, they had worked those out. Ellie and Lieutenant Scott had christened them an item, which was as close as to officially together you could get aboard Chaser. Between the new arrivals and the extra resources, morale was good aboard ship. As for their actual mission, Rush had calculated that they had slowly catching up to Destiny since launch. They were now only a week or 2 behind the ancient vessel. But based on what Jin and Perry had told them, resettling the ship before paranoid mode deactivated was not an option. So for the foreseeable future, it was Chaser that would be their home. Spira Gate Room Year 3, Day 10, 1307. Spira had been in dry dock for 5 days. While they had been on Freedom Prime, the new Asurans had made a discovery about the Mark II FTL drive that Spira had. On Destiny, the drive particles simply flowed from the bow to the stern. But on Spira, there was a secondary field of particles was spiraled around the ship. This made the field more stable and increased the ship's speed. There was, however, one issue with this upgrade. It stopped working if the ship was above a certain size. Tilda, which is why Spira is not a carbon copy of Destiny, Tilda Vale thought as he read the report. Tilda, and it also means that we can't use the new Asuran's nanites or a Wraith expansion to make the ship a whole lot bigger. Tilda, but there was some good news. It turned out that with some minor modifications, they could make the field big enough to add a Wraith expansion underneath Deck 6. This new Deck 7 wasn't very big, but there was enough space to hold one of the puddle jumpers. So the front of the deck would be a bay that would allow them to use Jumper 2 as a shuttle. Jumper 1 would stay where in the original Jumper Bay/equipment room. The rear of the deck would be a lower level to Hydroponics Bay 2. But now that they had 120 people aboard, that expansion would not provide them with enough food. And that was why Vale was now in the gate room. "Glad to see you again, Klaus," Vale began. "Things just haven't been the same without you and the other new Assurans." "Thank you, boss." "So, what is this big upgrade you have been cooking up?" "Well, Spira is basically divided into 4 chunks." "Right. The inhabited section, then the rooms with the spare parts, then 3 meters of radiation sponge stuff, and then the actual engine compartment, which is where the FTL drive and the sublight drive sit. And we can't go there because we would end up glowing up in the dark." "Yeah," Klaus began. "Now, there is one main chamber with spare parts, with several side chambers. Our big upgrade is a new version of the radiation sponge stuff. Besides the you can't move it or all the radiation will leak out, there are several issues with the old version. For instance, if the radiation in the engine compartment climbs more than 15%, it stops working, and everybody dies horribly. Fortunately, we came up with Foam 2.0. It will do the job with only 50 centimeters of material, and even if the radiation increases 1,800%, we'll be safe. And because 2.0 is much thinner, we've gained a lot of square meters in the spare parts region. In fact, all the spare parts now fit in the side chambers, allowing us to repurpose the main chamber." "Exactly, and it is 3 decks tall." Klaus pointed to the bulkhead behind the Stargate, where a brand new doorway allowed access to the chamber. The doors had not been installed yet, so there was a sheet of plastic there instead. Klaus pushed it aside. "Here, on deck 4, it's Dr. Bennett's new digs. Until now, we only had 4 normal beds and 2 in the isolation ward. Version 2.0 has 6 normal beds and 3 isolation cubicles with 1 bed each." "And the other decks?" "We moved the kitchen and the mess hall into the deck 3 space, which not only made it twice as big, but also meant that deck 0 was empty. So now it's one big hydroponics bay. As for the deck 5 space, we used that to build science lab too. So the briefing room is back to being a briefing room." Klaus nodded. Excellent, Vale thought. Then his radio activated and Haley asked him to come to the bridge. He made his way up there and found her in the command chair. She was working on the final paperwork. Spira was scheduled to break orbit at 1600 hours. So they were running final checks, finishing the last construction work and writing official status reports. She offered him a clipboard. "Final crew list, boss," Haley began. "All it needs is your stamp of approval." "What's the count?" 60 humans, 1 Zivalo, 14 Gynaco, and 15 each for the Nakai, Ursini, and New Assurans." Vale signed the report and gave her back the clipboard. "So 120 in total, of which only 105 need food and water. Speaking of which, we are fully loaded. By the way, has the brass cooked up any specific orders for us yet, other than follow Chaser? There might be some pointers coming from Chaser, but the briefing is not until 1500 hours." Haley nodded and went back to her paperwork. "Chaser Mess Hall Year 3, Day 10, 1445. Colonel Young walked into the mess hall. Illy and Varro were sitting at table and studying a map of some kind. Young walked up to them and took a look at the map. It was a map of Sector 3325. Chaser had passed through this region about a week after the Battle of the Border, as their fight with the Vengeance was called in the official reports. "What have you got?" Varro found something in the charts. "This is a map of Sector 3325 based on the telemetry from the siege ships. As you can see, it's an empty zone." An empty zone was an area inside that was inside the course plotted by the siege ships, but lacked stargates. There are planets and stars, but apparently there was nowhere suited to put a gate. Yesterday, Telford, send this, Varro began, while taking out a transparent plastic sheet. It's a map of Sector 3325 made by the order of the other, and Varro unrolled the sheet and on top of the map. There's an anomaly. Whereas the map showed no habitable places at all, the overlaid sheet clearly showed 2 habitable moons, and those moons had not been there before. They weren't already present bodies that had been terraformed, they had just appeared. Tilda, well, this is familiar. Tilda, the last time they had encountered something popping out like this way, when they had encountered Eden. Zavaris. We think so, Illy began, because this is Chaser's map of 3325. Illy unrolled another plastic sheet and put it over the first one. Now there were 8 moons in the area, and they followed the course of destiny, with each being slightly bigger than the one before it. How did we miss this? We've been focusing on worlds with stargates, not off-the-grid planets, Varro said. And we presumed that the Zavaris went straight to building planets, but this, he gestured towards the map. This might be proof that there was a curve to get there. Young nodded. If Spira could find proof of Zavaris technology on those moons, it might finally give them a clue to this mysterious race. He had barely come to that conclusion in his head when the ship's alarm began blaring and he had to make his way to the bridge. When Young reached the bridge, he found that Chaser's long-range sensors had detected several starships ahead, and they did not belong to any species they had ever seen before. It turned out that Spira was not the only ship facing a mystery. 6 bits and pieces. Epsilon Site Science Lab 1 Year 3, Day 10, 1605. Spira had left on schedule. After receiving a report from Chaser, she had set course for Sector 3325. As soon as they had jumped to FTL, Telford had been asked to come to Science Lab 1. The new Assurans had been building a piece of technology there, and it had just been completed. What do we have here? A time machine, Frank, the only new Assuran still on the base, said. Sort of. What do you mean? This machine will create a temporal passage, but it will be tiny. Frank paused to press some buttons. We will use it to send several nanites back in time to Destiny. He pressed more buttons. Colonel Vale already gave us a message to program into them. Frank handed Telford a note. So, what do you think? Fixed it. You'd be surprised what you can do with alien nanites and a time machine. And yeah, it's cheating. But who cares? Lieutenant Colonel Mark Vale. You know that Vale is a full bird colonel now. He is now, but if everything goes according to plan. Right, Telford nodded. Fire it up. Frank engaged the machine. Telford already knew how this would end, because these were the nanites that would rescue Illy. They would then help Jin and Amanda Perry survived before becoming Ben. Tilda, the weirdness that comes with the Stargate program. Tilda, but that was part of why he had joined in the first place. Telford smiled and watched Frank do his thing. Spira Science Lab 2 Year 3, Day 10, 1610. Vale walked into Science Lab 2. Before this lab had been installed, Science Lab 1 had mainly been Nikita Aronov, Allison Porter, and Jennifer Haley's digs. It had also been used a lot by Alec Carlson, Sinara, and Xander Henderson. The new lab had an archaeological workstation and an engineering one. There were also 2 general workstations that could be used by everybody. Aronov and Sinara were working at the archaeological station, while Carlson and Henderson were at the engineering station. The 2 other stations were being used other members of the science staff. How are the new digs, Nikita? Waiting for stuff to analyze, Aronov began. We left all our samples and puzzle pieces behind at the Epsilon site. Well, we're on our way to Sector 3325. If Varro and Illy's hunch is right, and the Zavaris did use that area to practice, we'll have plenty of research to do. I hope so, Sinara began. In the meantime, we have been testing the equipment, and everything is ready to go. Good, Vale nodded. It will take us 40 days to get there. Is that without any stops along the way? The new and improved hydroponics bay will provide us with plenty of food. And the water tanks are loaded to capacity, so we should have enough supplies for a couple of weeks. Sonara nodded, and then Vale left the science lab. As he did, he pondered the rest of Young's report. Besides the theory, the colonel had also reported that Chaser was approaching inhabited space, and that these ships did not belong to any species they had seen before. Young had estimated that they were mere hours away from entering alien space. So there's a good chance all hell is about to break loose. So Vale headed for the bridge to see if these new aliens were friend of foe. Chaser Bridge Year 3, Day 10, 1805. Chaser was approaching the alien ships. The rear section was a cylinder containing 5 sublight engines, which were arranged in the same formation as they were found on a dice. It was connected to a sphere that served as the forward section. 2 pylons, one to starboard and one to port, jutted out from the sphere and ended at a cigar-shaped engine. The pylons went down at a 45-degree angle and were long enough so that the engines were the lowest part of the vessel. FTL drives, Lieutenant Matthew Scott asked. Probably, Dale Volker began. Positioning them like that would keep any radiation leaks away from the crew. Okay. Scott nodded and added that to his notes. They knew where the engines were, what was the front was, and where the inhabited section probably was located. But, so far, they had no signs of weapons or defenses, nor had they seen the ships move. They're just sitting in orbit. Which meant that they had no idea just how fast these ships were. Here we go, people, Young said. Varro, how are we looking on weapons? On standby, Varro said. They sailed past the first alien ships. Scott and Varro both kept watching their new company, but the ships didn't move as they headed deeper into their space. Then the sensors began to feed back readings from the planets they were passing. Between Varro and Scott, Lisa Park was studying these readings. Colonel, these planets have cities, she said. We're detecting power signatures and life signs. Thank you, Young said before turning to Scott. Are those ships moving? No, sir, Scott said. Young looked at the displays, but the alien ships weren't giving them any clues about their owners. Chaser kept heading deeper into their space. As they did so, the ships did not move. But hidden behind an advanced cloak, a scout ship was launched from the surface of one of the planets. A smaller version of the vessels that Scott and Varro had scanned, it was home to only 2 crew members. The aliens had seen Destiny pass weeks before, but because it was empty, it had not been labeled a threat. The arrival of this second vessel, however, had rattled the planetary officials, so the scout had orders to follow the second alien vessel, which was exactly what it did. Spira Jumper Bay Year 3, Day 50, 1207. NR-1 was sitting in the front of the jumper, while NR-3 was in the back. Vale was behind the controls. Because none of the moons had stargates, the jumper was the only way to get down to them. Sitting behind Vale, Tizalo was slightly jealous. But the ancient vessel refused to take orders from people who were not ancient or human. Here we go, people. I wish I could fly one of these, Tizalo said. The new Asurans are working on it, Porter began. So you might be able to do so soon, and we all know you have the skills to fly this beauty. Tizalo smiled at her. The jumper flew out of the bay and headed for the moon. It was a small moon, which appeared to be 2 large ice caps that was separated by an equatorial zone. This zone appeared to more friendly to flora and fauna. Porter was sitting next to Vale and used the controls there and her laptop to start gathering more detailed information. There was a beep and a map appeared of the temperate zone. A blue dot indicated there was something there. Is that an obelisk like the one on Eden? GL asked. It looks like an obelisk, but much smaller than the one on Eden, Porter said. I recommend we land as close as we can, boss, because if I'm reading this right, it's on an island in a swamp. There's a good chance it's surrounded by quicksand. Okay, Vale said. I'll park her right next to the obelisk. The jumper dove into the atmosphere. Tizalo got a feeling that this would be a very interesting mission. Chaser Mess Hall Year 3, Day 12, 0754. It had been more than a day since they had entered alien space, but they had not learned anything about this new species. All the alien ships they had encountered had been near planets. Rush and Ali believed that they were guarding the alien colonies. Young was sitting in the mess hall, eating breakfast, which was when he realized that they were about to enter the next stage of this little dance, because they needed to send a team through the gate to restock on water. Tilda, how will our alien friends react to that? Tilda, there was only one way to find out. Which was why Lieutenant Scott had gathered a team 2 tables over. Besides him, the team had 3 other members. Dr. Nicholas Rush wanted to go on the mission in case they found any alien technology. Lieutenant Vanessa James was the security for the mission, and Tamara Johansson wanted to see if there are any medicinal plants. The upgraded search filters had been doing well so far, so Young figured that the chances of them finding something useful were pretty good. They finished breakfast and headed for the gate room. Corporal Barnes was behind the dialing computer, while Dale Volker was behind the Kino telemetry console. Volker had a Kino at the ready. "Dial her up, Corporal," Young said. "Yes, sir." Barnes selected the address and the gate began dialing. As soon as the wormhole opened, Volker sent the Kino through. It showed them a grassland under an orange sky. The readings also showed that the atmosphere was the same as on Earth. Young gave Scott a look, and the team stepped through the gate. Then the Stargate deactivated. "Stay here in case this goes wrong," Young said. "Yes, sir," Barnes said. "We'll hold down the fort," Volker added. As Young headed for the bridge, he wondered how long it would be before they would get some answers. What he didn't know was that behind Chaser, the alien scout ship had just decloaked. It had detected the wormhole and traced its course. The vessel had shut down the cloak to divert the power to its hyperdrive. It appeared on Chaser's sensors for a moment, but then jumped into subspace and headed for the planet. Prime Hive Fleet Headquarters Year 3, Day 12, 0805. Supreme Commander Ha-55Z was reading the report on the second alien vessel. Ha-55Z was the leader of the 4th Space Fleet, which Scout Ship 417, the vessel that had been following the alien ship, had been part of. But then the alien vessel had projected a major subspace distortion, which had baffled the crew of the Scout. Ha-55Z, however, had access to classified information that they did not. Tilda rank has its privileges. Tilda. His race called themselves the Haliri. While they were a reptilian species which procreated by laying eggs, their society was organized more like a beehive. The males were common, while females were rare and pulled the strings. Had a human seen them, they would have described them as an upright Komodo dragon. However, there were 2 major differences. The first was their eyes, which were feline, and they lacked the long tongue that species had. Instead, they had a normal human tongue. Ha-55Z put away the report and took out another folder. Throughout Haliri space, they had found large alien rings of unknown origin and purpose, but there were plenty of theories on what they were for. And one of these theories was that they were some kind of advanced transportation system. Tilda timed to put that theory to the test. Tilda Scout Ship 417 had already set course to follow the distortion, but he thought that was not enough. Officially, ground forces were not under the command of the 4th Space Fleet. But he had been in command of the fleet long enough to have built up friends in the right places. He checked the coordinates, then opened a channel to RK-19B. 19B was a middle commander in the ground forces of the planet where the subspace distortion had been headed. He would be able to send a group of soldiers to the area where the planet's ring was located. Tilda and take it from there. Tilda Ha 55Z activated the communications unit built into his desk and opened a channel. 7 Moon 1. Moon 1 Grassy Field Year 3, Day 50, 12:15. Tizalo and Ji Yao stood at the foot of the obelisk and looked up. Tilda Woe. Tilda Ji Yao thought as he studied the alien structure. It was 500 feet high, with writing on all 4 sides. Porter and Coulson were already setting up instruments to study it. It was at time like this that Ji Yao wished that he had better science skills. To him, it was simply a big stone structure. But it was crystal clear that there was more to this construction. Me too, Tizalo said. Make that 3, Vale said. For the record, Ji Yao began, what are we talking about here? The look on your face, it was pretty clear that you were wishing you had better science skills, Vale said. And yes, I know how to read Nakai facial expressions, and Orsini ones too. It had taken Vale some time, but he had figured out how to read the faces of his alien crew members a while ago. Tilda not that I care about the alien part anymore. Tilda he had stopped doing so a long time ago. That's why you get paid the big bucks, boss, Tizalo said. Wait, we get paid, Ji Yao said with a smile. Vale snickered and left them the 2 team members to discuss things amongst themselves. He decided not remind them that the IOA and Stargate Command paid everybody at the Delta site, Epsilon site, and both starships in the program. For the human crew members, the money either went to family members or people designated by the person whose name was on the check. Both Ji Yao and Tizalo knew that the alien crew members got paid as well. But because they couldn't spend the money, since they were millions of light years away from Earth, they had authorized Stargate Command to create a charity called Hope and Freedom. Hope and Freedom helped refugees and homeless people. Vale approached Porter and Coulson, who were trying to get more information on the obelisk and its inner workings. So, what are the instruments saying? So far, nothing much, Coulson said. This is one stubborn piece of alien technology. Yeah, we were expecting as much, Vale said. Tilda this things is not going to reveal its secrets easily, Tilda. Vale looked at the screen that came with the instrument that Coulson had just set up. As Coulson had said, it was not telling them that much. But Vale had read enough SGC reports to know that alien technology tended to block scans, and that circuits were usually well hidden. Leaving Haley and Coulson to do their thing, he walked around the obelisk. But this did not tell him much either. So he looked around to see if there were any other structures. That was when he noticed 2 cabins that flanked a pier. These were clearly not built by the Zavaris. So Vale decided to take a closer look. And he was not alone, because Laura Cadman had the same idea. She had told her team to stay at the obelisk to guard the rest of NR-1. Colonel, let's take a closer look at these. Vale opened the door and they stepped into the cabin. To begin with, all the furniture was covered by plastic sheets. These sheets had a thick layer of dust on them, making it clear that the place had not been used in ages. There was a table with 4 chairs, 4 beds, and a kitchen. The kitchen did not have a refrigerator, nor did the cabin seem to have electricity. There was, however, a wood stove for heating the place, and one of the drawers in the kitchen was loaded with candles. Next, Vale opened some of the cabinets. He found some canned foods, and what appeared to be an alien version of meals ready to eat, or MREs, as they were called on Earth, along with plenty bottles of water. MRE, Cadman asked. This looks like some kind of emergency stash. Yes, all this stuff is meant to keep for a long time, Vale began. So who do you think put it here? I don't know, Cadman pulled a sheet off one of the chairs. But this looks like a normal chair to me, so they are probably not that different from us. There was another door into a second room. Cadman opened it to reveal a small, windowless bathroom. It had a toilet, a sink, and a toilet. And they have to use the bathroom, so there's that. Let's take a look at the other cabin. They inspected the other cabin, which was identical to the first. That done, they made their way down the pier. It became wider after passing between the cabins. There were 4 two-person canoes tied to the pier on one side, while the other side was home to a large steam-powered boat that was clearly designed to hold 8 people. "Everything is designed for 8, Cadman asked. "Why?" "I have no." And then he realized something. "This sector has been scouted by order of the other, right? What do you want to bet that the crew complement of an order scout ship is 8? Vale paused. "These cabins are safe houses." "But how does that help them survive in the long term? They would need some way to signal for help, and the cabins are not outfitted to do that. So how do they get off the planet?" "Well, they are right next to the obelisk." Vale looked back at the cabins and then the obelisk. Maybe the Order knew more about this alien structure than they did. Tilda perhaps even how to use it. Tilda, but if they did, the cabins did hold any clues on the details. He wondered if these were the only cabins on the planet. "Tilda, there's only one way to find out." "Tilda," so he gestured towards the puddle jumper. Moon 1 Grassy Field Year 3, Day 50, 12:35. Vale and Cadman had left in the puddle jumper to look for more cabins, while Coulson and Porter had continued their attempts to probe the obelisk. Alas, their instruments had not been able to penetrate the structure. Coulson had taken one of the chairs from the cabins and was sitting on it, looking up at the obelisk. "There has to be something we're missing," Coulson said. "We've tried every instrument we have," Porter said, "and still, nothing." Gial began. "Tzalo, can we come with something unscientific that might actually be useful in this situation?" "I can think of one thing," Tzalo said. Tzalo began knocking on the obelisk. "Tilda, I thought he was going to shoot it." Tilda Coulson thought. "Tilda, but that could always be Plan C." Tilda Tzalo and Gial knocked on one panel at a time. Suddenly, Tzalo stopped and gestured towards them. As Coulson and Porter walked up to the obelisk, he knocked again. The panel sounded hollow. Coulson studied the panel and noticed 2 small circles in the lower corners. Going on a hunch, Coulson pressed one of the circles. It moved. "Stand back," he said, "just in case." He pushed both circles, which were actually buttons. There was a grinding noise, and then the panel slid aside. Behind it was a nook with a control panel of some kind, but the writing on the buttons were not in the same language as the markings on the outside. Instead, they were a mix of Nakai, Ursini, and Jainako letters. "Well, I think that we just found the Order's emergency transmitter," Coulson said. "Which raises the question, how did they install it?" Porter asked. "And why such a complicated setup? If I was designing this, I would simply limit it to a big red button," Tzalo said. "I mean, all you would need is a single frequency distress call. This," he gestured towards the controls, "allows you to change the frequency, the destination, and the message send. Why go through all this trouble for a distress beacon?" "Good questions," Coulson said. "Let's see what answers we can find." "I'll break out the translation notes," Porter said. "If we can figure out how to work this thing, it should be able to give us those answers." Porter went to get the notes, while Coulson grabbed one of their instruments. "Tilda, I hope the Colonel comes back soon, because maybe knowing more about those cabins will help us solve this." Tilda, he also had a feeling that they would either get some answers or end up with an even bigger puzzle. Spira Bridge Year 3, Day 50, 12:35. While NR-1 and NR-3 were down on the moon, Haley and Levine were using the sensors to take a closer look at the rest of the solar system. Haley suspected that there might be more to this Zavaris training ground than what they map had told them, so they were running all the scans that they could. They had just finished a scan when there was a series of beeps. "Sonara, what do we have?" Haley asked. "I calibrated the sensors look for the metals the obelisk is made from, and we have a whole series of signatures in the asteroid belt." The moon orbited a gas giant, which was the 3rd planet in its solar system. Between the 3rd planet and the 2nd one was an asteroid belt. and there was a row of blue dots in that belt. So, do you think we should take a closer look? Sounds like a plan. Haley turned to Levine, set a course at full sublight. Yes, ma'am, Levine said. We should be there in 3 minutes. So, are you thinking that the Zavaris started with asteroids and worked their way up to moons? Sinara asked. That's the theory, and there is only one way to figure out if it is true. Sinara nodded. If they had gotten into this situation before reaching Freedom Prime, they would have had a major hiccup to overcome. Before, they had not had any spacesuits. But they had gotten no less than 6 suits from the Primians. They were not exactly the most advanced technology. Tilda, but they are airtight, and they should get the job done. Tilda, besides, why should Colonel Vale get all the fun? 8H2Z-118. H2Z-118 Hill Year 3, Day 12, 0930. Scott looked through his electronic binoculars and studied the view. Ever since they had moved from Destiny to Chaser, they had gotten access to better equipment. The binoculars were one piece of gear on that list. They had found a river and several interesting plants, so their official mission had been a success. But then they had spotted what looked an awful lot like a settlement of some kind. So now they were taking a closer look at that from the top of a hill next to the river. Doesn't look very big, Scott said. 15, maybe 20 houses. No obvious defenses, so it's probably not a military installation. He handed the binoculars to Rush, who studied the settlement as well. Because it was daytime, there was no easy to tell if the settlement had electricity. And there were no power lines either, nor any obvious power sources. Tilda, no windmills, no solar panels, and no reactors. Tilda, he turned to Rush. So, what do you think? I think we are looking at a backwater town in the middle nowhere, Rush said. Think we can go down there and talk to the natives? I don't see any signs of movement, Rush began. And even if there were people there, we don't have the translation matrix necessary to do so. So we might end up facing torches and pitchforks, James said. Great, just great. Scott realized that Rush was right, but they also needed more information about the locals and their species, so he led the team towards the town. What Scott and the rest of the team didn't know was that they themselves were also being watched. Low Commander Dr. 20 Ada had been peering through his own powered binoculars from a nearby hill. So far, the aliens had gathered several plants and sent a considerable amount of water through the alien ring. The brass would not be happy when he submitted his report. They had tried to downplay the alien rings, but once word got out that these devices were some kind of portal, they would have a riot on their hands. As for the aliens, they were now headed towards the farming town of Gamox. He gestured for his troops to follow them. They needed to know more about these aliens. Chaser Young's quarters Year 3, Day 12, 0935. Young was sitting in his quarters, reading reports. One of the perks of the transfer from Chaser to Destiny was that his quarters on the new ship had several improvements. To begin with, the pillows on Destiny had been terrible. His current bed came with much better pillow. Another improvement was the office section of his quarters. The Primians had made an L-shaped wooden desk for him by hands. It came with 6 drawers and looked like it had been made on Earth in the 17th century. There was a special place for him to put his laptop, another gift from the Primians that kept it from sliding, and 3 chairs. 2 were simple chairs for visitors, and 1 was a luxurious chair for the colonel. Young had just finished a report when there was a knock at his door. Enter. The door opened, and Jin came in. We finished the decontamination on the water we brought back from the planet, she said. Greer said that the water tank is maxed out. She handed him a folder. And TJ reported that they found some very interesting plants. The botanical team should have plenty of work to do once they bring them back. Once they bring them back, they're still off-world. They found a settlement. Young put the folder down and grabbed his radio from one of the drawers. He and Jin headed for the gate room, where Volker and Barnes were still manning the two stations. Young told Barnes to dial the gate, which she did. As soon as the wormhole finished forming, the colonel called Scott. =/= Scott here. =/= Lieutenant, what are you doing? =/= We found a settlement, sir. No signs of military presence, so far. =/= Lieutenant, that is not the mission, Young said. Return to. That was as far as Young got before gunshots erupted over the radio. Then the channel went dead. H2Z 118 Dirt Road Year 3, Day 12, 0942. Matthew Scott was on the ground as bullets whizzed over his head. It turned out that they had walked into a farming town. The kind where the locals carried sewn-off shotguns and hunting rifles, and they were not fond of outsiders, which was why they were now shooting. But they were ironically not shooting at Scott and his people. Instead, they were in a skirmish with an alien military patrol that had apparently been following the team. So now Scott and his team were on the ground, while the two sides fought it out. Scott and James could join in, but they had no idea which side to support. Not to mention, they could end up starting a war between the Alliance and this new species. Suddenly, the shooting began to die down. The patrol had retreated from the engagement. Scott looked around and slowly got to his feet. The aliens appeared to be reptilian, and more importantly, were not hostile towards Scott and his people. The largest off the aliens appeared to be the leader. He seemed to give instructions to the other, who went back into their houses. Next, he gestured towards a square in the middle of the village. Scott knew that Young had told them to return, but he didn't want to ruin the goodwill he had with these people. Not to mention the fact that there was still a military patrol out there. So Scott led the way deeper into the village. The square was a circle with a well in the middle. It was at this point that his radio came to life. =/= Young to Scott. =/= Scott here. =/= Where the hell are you? I gave you an order to return to the ship, Lieutenant. =/= Yes, sir. But we just made contact with the natives, sir, Scott said. =/= Contact. It sounded more like a firefight to me. =/= That was my fault, Commander. =/= An unknown voice said. =/= We got into a little scrap with the military boys. =/= Scott looked around to see the alien leader speaking to some kind of communications device. Apparently, it included a translation circuit of some kind. The voice was surprisingly soft and didn't fit with the alien's appearance. =/= They needed to be reminded of the rules. =/= Who is this? =/= This is Ga 25H. I am the leader of the village of Pal. =/= The leader said. =/= I promise your people are safe in this village. If you do not believe me, feel free to send more of your people. =/= There was a moment of silence, then Young spoke up. =/= Scott, be careful. I'll be there as soon as possible. =/= Yes, sir. Scott led his team into the village. He got the feeling that they were walking into a powder keg. Tilda, there is something going on here. Tilda, and that they were about to learn a lot about this species. He just hoped that they would be able to return to Chaser to tell the rest of the crew all about it. H2Z 118 Dry Creek Bed Year 3, Day 12, 0947. Dr. 20 Ada and his patrol were a dry creek bed. His patrol had chased off by the people of the village, which he had realized was the village of Pal and not Gamox. It turned out that Gamox was farther to the north. Dr. 20 Ada had botched the identification, which was why he was now cursing himself. On the bright side, while 3 of his soldiers had been wounded, none of them had been killed. He stopped cursing and took out his wireless communicator. It did not take long to ask for a medical team. That done, he reached into his pocket and took out a small book. The book was the Sector Atlas. It had maps of the region and notes about key features. He looked up the entry for PAL and read it. Tilda, well, that explains why they opened fire on us. Tilda had also suggested that the aliens' visit to PAL might get rather interesting. So he would wait for the medical team and then hold this position. Tilda, maybe I can still salvage this mission. Tilda, for now, however, it was simply a waiting game. H2Z 118 Hill Year 3, Day 12, 0955. Young had gathered a second team and taken it through the gate. Besides himself, the team consisted of Greer, Varro, and Airman Dunning. Now the team was laying on the same hill where Scott had spotted the village to begin with. Young was looking through a pair of electronic binoculars. He studied the village before spotting a dry creek bed between them and it. Then he had seen the aliens inside said creek bed. They had been well hidden, and it was clear that these aliens were some kind of military unit. Tilda, even if I didn't know about the firefight, Tilda Young thought. This was because the aliens were wearing some kind of uniform. He also saw that they were carrying some kind of firearms. Tilda, the game is afoot. Tilda, they would have to steer clear of the unit in the dry creek bed and try to approaching the town from the other side. The question that kept playing in his mind was, do they know that we are watching them? And were the aliens watching back? Either way, it was a waiting game for now.